In celebrating 150 years of ministry at the Presbyterian Church of Wyoming, we remember those stories that helped shape us, that brought meaning and hope into our lives. In hopes that such stories will inspire us, I sat down with several of PCW's longest active members to share how the church has impacted their lives.
We had built a house in Wyoming, had been in it about a year, and I got called back in the Army. We were down there for a year, and we came back and decided that was we should get more involved with the church and with the girls. So the minister at that time was Charlie Fredericks, and so he came over to see us. And we got interested and talked to him about we'd like to join, and so that was fine. But we also had a number of neighbors that were members.
I first connected with the Presbyterian Church of Wyoming when my parents moved to Wyoming when I was 2 years old. Mm-hmm. So my mother came from a family of church people who enjoyed helping at the church. So I started at 2 years old going to church and have continued even during the short periods when I lived in other parts of Cincinnati. Yeah. It's my home church and always will be.
We came here from having lived in Merrimont, where we met the parents of Charlie Frederick, who was a young man in ministry college. And when we were sent to Europe and we came back from Europe and we couldn't find a home in Merrimont, so we decided to build a house in Wyoming and move here. So obviously Charlie had been called to this church here. So we couldn't have gone anywhere else except to Charlie's church.
A knock on the door. The knock on the door was one of the members of his church. It was, we need some help in the Sunday school. And would you help us? We said, sure.
So bottom line is he bought a house on Burns Avenue, about 4 blocks down the road from the church. And he did this all on his own. My mother had nothing to do with it whatsoever. First time she saw it was when the moving van came up. And I told Bill Seal, I said, Bill, you and this church saved my parents' marriage, because obviously 4 blocks away, we walked down and attended church here regularly, and both mom and dad both fell in love with this church.
We moved to Wyoming in 1957.
Yes.
And in February. And it wasn't long before Bob Duncan, who is a wonderful member of the church, came to visit John and asked him to teach Sunday school. And that was it. 57, we joined the church.
Jack and I moved to Wyoming, and we came here to church. The associate pastor was Charlie Fredericks, and Jack knew Charlie from scouting, and so that was just fine with him to be here.
It goes back many years. My parents were both educators. My mother, Polly Marty, started Lads and Lassies Nursery School, which today is still operative in our church. I bring that up because they both were very strong in education, and it was very meaningful to them to make sure their 2 sons had the very best education. And it was decided that Wyoming was the place to be for the education of their 2 boys. So we transferred our membership from the Glendale Presbyterian Church to the Wyoming Presbyterian Church, and that's how we got connected with Wyoming.
One of the other ones was College Hill started a something called the Teen Breakfast Club, and it was at College Hill. And so one day a week, they had teenagers from this area, and it grew to be tremendous. They might have as many as 600 show up. Finally, it was getting so big, and we had a number of our kids from the Wyoming, PCW, going there. So they came to us and said, why don't you have some of your people, guys, come up and help us work? And so we did that for maybe 1 or 2 years, man. You had to be up there 6:30 in the morning. You start cooking eggs, and they had these big steel frying pans, and it was, you couldn't stop. But with that many kids, you go, there's another batch of eggs. But I learned something about that if you put butter in there, the eggs didn't turn green. They said, well, maybe we should kind of split this apart. And so they asked us if we'd take that on at Wyoming.
Yeah. So
we did. And we got up to about 150 a day. So I look back and said, that was pretty remarkable.
Well, I was on the board of trustees, and they did not know what to do with me. And finally, one guy said, well, why don't we develop a group called the Arts and Acquisitions Committee, and you can take care of that, because they knew my background had been in interior design, and certainly not in finance. But I learned a lot, and they were all very welcoming.
Right out of junior high into high school, every Sunday I ushered at our church. I found that to be very enjoyable because I got to meet older people whose children I had associated with. Next came after I got out of Miami University, Reverend Fredericks, who was a great guy. I worked with him in the youth group for a number of years. Reverend Fredericks was also the gentleman that married Barb and myself. And so we had strong feelings for him as our pastor.
But we loved the choir for children. And Winnie Petrie, who was the choir director, and said she just gave of herself so much and would give voice lessons for some of the kids. And it was, you were chosen to be a member of that. And so that was a really an exciting thing for them to be chosen to be in Winnie's choir.
Oh, I guess the Stephen ministry would have to be my number one. It was very, very meaningful, and it was good for the church. We had over 100 people that we had worked with the first year. You wouldn't know the people that would need help, whether it was losing a spouse or a pet, a dog or a cat or something, you know. They needed help to work through this. I worked with it for 15 years, and I had to give it up because of moving here. It was just wonderful.
Connections to God, to the community, to needs. During the recent years, there are people who from this church really took care of us. With, I'll come by. I know that you always need bananas, and I'll come by and pick up. I'm going down to the grocery store and pick food up and deliver food to her. But it's just a wonderful group of people.
It's been something that's kept me grounded. Mm-hmm. When we were teenagers, we had a class. I'm trying to think. There were probably about a dozen kids, boys and girls, and we would have Sunday school in the tower in a rather small room where we had a long table, like a lunch table, that seated all of us. And at some point, just about every Sunday, the boys would kick the legs out from under the end of the table, and all of the Bibles would slide out through the window. And we all thought that was a wonderful joke, and somehow they managed to do it every week.
It has meant the world to me. I ran the junior high church camp twice out at St. Edmunds. We had 40 junior highs that would be with us for 2 weeks, and that was wonderful to me. I still can meet one of those junior highs, Mrs. Engelman. So that I like too.
It's been very important in our family's daily life. Our 4 children were baptized in the church. They all became members of the church. We even have some grandchildren that have been baptized at PCW. Also, important to us has been our relationships with the pastors of our church. We've been blessed, and they've helped us with our spiritual growth. I've known the ministers from Reverend Logan all the way up the line. I can't thank our pastors enough for what they've done for our church. They've been very dedicated, and we've been very blessed. And I would ask that God continues to bless our church, our pastors, and members as He has blessed us over the past 150 years.
We had a lot of fun.
Yes,
we had a lot of fun.
And we're involved in lots of stuff, and that we make good friends.
When we
vice
painted
versa.
the Hendricks house with polka dots. But that wasn't a church event.
If you need help, there always seemed to be somebody who was available to come and help. And I'm grateful for you all.
Well, I think Lou and I have made some great friends. And the other people that kind of influenced us, and Lou especially, was Richard Yulee's parents. Dot, Yulee, and Lou were very close friends, and so that helped. That got us involved in some things, dinners and all of that. And they lived next to the church for a number of years. So
there was a huge walnut tree in front of where the new addition is now. There was quite a bit of discord over taking down that tree, because it had to come down because it was too close to the building. In fact, I think it would have been in the building if they had left it there. And one of the things Dad agreed to do with the council and the neighbors was to use some of the wood from the tree to make benches and a table. And I believe a display case was also made out of it. And that's easier said than done, because this tree, the largest part of the tree, which had been the part that was closest to the ground, was 24 inches in diameter. And you think about that, that's a tree about that big. And so they cut it down, and they took off. And once they got off of 32 in Adams County, they got into some back roads. And that's when the adventure really started, because my sister-in-law said that they went across this one bridge that was actually a pretty high bridge, but it was a wood bridge. And as they were going across the bridge, they could hear the bridge creak, because they were probably at least twice over the weight that the bridge was supposed to take. And as they were going down the road, that the trailer started to sway back and forth, and she said there was a lot of swaying and praying simultaneously. So they got in, pulled the trailer in, and the Amish people helped unload the wood, and the result was the benches and table that are in the gathering area now.
Happy 150th anniversary, PCW.
Happy 150th anniversary, PCW.
happy 150th PCW.
Happy 150th PCW. You're a little older than I am.
Happy 150th PCW.
Happy 150 years PCW.
And happy 150th anniversary.
Happy 150th anniversary. Oh, it's wonderful.